Hey everyone, this is Craig Frazier from This May End Badly, and I'm here with my buddy Chris Arpin from Createx Colors in Connecticut. And no, this is not the podcast that you normally see on Tuesday nights, but what it is, it's a little bit of a video that me and Arpin decided to do from two different sides of the country concerning what we like to call the do's and don'ts of painting. Filming videos recently over in Connecticut, we were talking about certain videos we would make comments on camera about, oh, make sure you always do that, make sure you always do that. And we got to thinking, if you got to go back and look at all these videos and find these little gems of wisdom, I like to call them, you're screwed. Or you have a hell of a lot more time than I do. So we decided to put together this video. So everyone say hi to Chris. Chris, say hi to everybody.
What's up, everybody?
Yeah, you're allowed to talk now. I just gave you permission. It is my show. Yeah. I'm the only one with the red background, so I'm sorry. Right. You don't get the cool green screen. But anyway, is there anything you'd like to add in about concerning the do's and don'ts? I mean, I like to call them the basics, the things that you, half the time I never mention because I assume people know them, and that is a major mistake. So what's your take on it?
No, I agree. I think we kind of got a solid list. When you and I talked before about it, like what you just said, it's very easy to overlook certain nuances that, become almost like muscle memory. You're so used to it that it becomes so simple that you don't think about it all the time. And now that we have been doing a lot more video and a lot more content, and we try to address it, but sometimes it kind of gets lost in translation. So I figured this would be a pretty simple way to streamline that whole little process of the questions that we do get a lot of, that we kind of miss the message sometimes. So this is kind of like our way of getting it on the mark.
Matter of fact, we should retitle it and just call it the Do's and Don'ts Part 1. Because I guarantee there's going to be another, like a Part 2 coming up at the end of all this. And we spent a lot of time. Me and Chris really worked hard. We woodshedded on this. I think we spent maybe 15 minutes at the end of lunch one day. Yeah. And wrote it on my Evernote. We're like, that good? Yeah, okay, we'll do a video sometime.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah, and by the way, when I say, and we have 1 through 20 of these do's and don'ts, and some have pictures, some don't. But it doesn't mean that like number 1 is really, really important, number 20 is less important, or vice versa. There's just the way we wrote them down. So number 1 is, it's got a little picture even, picture number 1, it's pull tape back and away from graphics when unmasking. Now, this is very important, and it has to do with paint lifting. It doesn't matter whether you're using solvent-based paint or water-based paint. When you're pulling tape away, you want to pull it back against itself, but in the direction away from the paint. That way you're not peeling in, because that can encourage either really thick paint or fresh paint from peeling. Do you have anything to add to that, Chris?
No, I mean, I think that was pretty much spot on. It's just the time that you wait to unmask. Sometimes waiting a little bit longer is better. It just gives the paint that much more time to kind of lock up, to give you a sharper tape line, tape edge, rather than sometimes people think to go at it sooner while it's still wet, thinking that you get a crisper line that way, but it's actually the opposite. Once that paint has a chance to really cross-link, and lock up, you're going to get a nice sharp line. So.
Well, back in the day, you could pull it when it wasn't wet, but it was still fresh, and you get that little bit of a fold over, so it wasn't that rock sharp edge. But that's not even as much, even with solvent-based paints today, let alone water-based. That's not true for water-based. With solvent-based, it's really not even true anymore, because there's a certain window in there that's much faster than it used to be. Number 2 is the classic wait 15 minutes after mixing paint. Now, we got a little picture for that too. It's picture number 2. The reason I mentioned that this is mostly for water-based, and matter of fact, it is for water-based, or waterborne paints. Whenever you mix them, mix the components, add the balancing clear to the colors, or add the reducer, you stir it really well, and then let it sit for just 15 freaking minutes. Now, what is your explanation, Chris, as to why we have to wait that long?
It takes a little longer with a water-based or waterborne product to have that emulsification process. It takes a little bit longer. Like if you hit something with solvent, if you have a solvent-based paint system, you hit it with urethane reducer, you can see it break it down almost immediately. The second you hit it with reducer, even thinner or whatever you'd use to clean, you can see it break down the material that much faster. With water, you almost have to force the reducer into the product a little more, because it's not that it's dissimilar material, but it just doesn't shock the paint. And that's what we're talking about too, is allowing that paint to acclimate. So you want everything to be
caustic. We're not dealing with caustic chemicals that react very. They have to take slow. They have to kind of.
It's aggressive.
I hate the term melt. They're not melting. They're just kind of combining.
you just want that mixture to be just completely consistent, and the longer it sits, that 15, it really is. Like you said it in the video when we did the hood, it is a different product when you let it sit. Like give it a good mix for at least a minute or 2 minutes, and then let it sit for 15 minutes. Go and wipe your product, your project down, go and tack everything off, get it all ready to go, and then come back. And it's not like you're sitting there watching it for 15 minutes. There's plenty of stuff you can do. Get your gun set up and ready to go, and then come back and grab your paint, and it will be a completely different animal in terms of just getting that everything settled in together. Only just like I said.
Any painter that doesn't have 15 minutes, I'm sorry, you're used to waiting 15 minutes between clear coats back in the day. Just whatever you did during those 15 minutes, do it before you start painting.
Right.
Another thing that's specifically for waterborne and water-based paints is to use air and not heat for drying. And we have a picture number 3 that shows a very cool air blower that you can use. And there's a number of different blower systems, or just leave your booth running. But the biggest mistake people make is to use heat, and a heat gun would be totally nightmarish. But even a hair dryer at a low setting, most hair dryers don't have pure air; they have low and high, and even the low setting can actually heat up and damage the paint. No, I mean by damage is that when the heat is on the paint, it dries the outside skin and does not allow the reducers, in water-based paint they have reducer as well, to let the water and reducers to actually evaporate out, and it can cause some serious issues. Not to mention you can
scab over.
You can create some really weird surfaces and just damage the binder itself.
Well, that's it. If too much heat, it'll actually affect adhesion. You're thinking that hot air is going to really lock this up. You'll actually cause a problem between the substrate, whatever it is that you're painting, and your top coat that you're trying to dry. It's just air movement. Air movement is simple way to do it.
Well, even with solvent, baking booths are known, when used improperly, baking booths can trap solvent. So, in a certain situation, heat can be necessary. Now, I'm not talking about don't heat your booth up if you're in sub-zero temperatures to make sure you have good environment. I'm talking about using forced heat on the paint. Just use air. A fan by itself makes that paint, the water-based paint, dry so much faster than you would even expect.
And that's it. And it's across the surface. It's not right on top. Like everybody wants to just like get right on it and blow air. Yeah. And you could do it with when you're airbrushing. Obviously, doing it with air with your airbrush, that's totally fine because it's a smaller scale. And you could do it with your spray gun, but you're causing 2 things at that point. You're, again, the mentality of being right on top of it and pushing air right over the surface. You want to be off to the side. So you want it to go.
If you put the artwork like this and have the fan here, if you have the artwork like that, you can actually be, if the paint's really wet, you can cause it to model. And it can also push underneath tape, and you can cause all kinds of other issues. So it's just, people think, oh yeah, aim it right now. No. Across the surface is what you want, especially in the direction of your booth ventilation if you're using a booth. There's a little trick that came about when water-based paints came on the market, and that was whenever you're using water-based paints, you want to use a solvent-based pre-cleaner. Whenever you're using solvent-based paints, you want to use a water-based pre-cleaner. So you're cleaning the surface, but you're not lifting any of the paint because you're using a similar material. We have a picture for that too. It's picture number 4.
Yep.
So anything you have on that?
In this picture, these are PPG products, and that's what I use here in the facility. That's what I've been familiar with. I actually, before I was here, if anybody knows my background, I was working in a restoration shop, and we were a PPG shop. So I have almost 20 years of paint experience with PPG, and I was using their enviro-based system as well before coming here. So I've got about 12 years of experience with the enviro-based. But this isn't just our spec, like you have to use PPG. This is just an example. Every paint manufacturer has a water-based and a solvent-based pre-cleaner. And I just stress when it goes to the paint process, like you guys can see the SX320 used to be DX320, now it's part of their One Choice line. They just kind of streamlined it. It is the least aggressive solvent that they make. They have a 440, 330, and then the 320. And then when it comes to the water-based, their waterborne cleaner, it's a very mild cleaner. And there's no reason, once you're in a booth environment, or in that paint process. It's not like you're trying to remove, like you just did an oil change, you know what I mean? Unless it's really contaminated, or you're worried that maybe there was somebody spraying tire shine or silicone, like something like that. But there's no reason to have a super aggressive solvent cleaner at that point. And at this point, the only time that I'm recommending a water-based, because actually we do have a lot of questions. We had somebody say, hey, I used a water-based pre-cleaner and I sprayed Candy 2.0 and I wiped it down before I cleared it and it smeared it. And that's exactly why we stress using a solvent-based, because essentially that's the same product that you're spraying. It's like spraying reducer back over the waterborne paint. So the only time I would use a water-based is right before you start applying like a sealer or your ground coat color, and then in between clearing. If you're doing a 2-session clear, I prefer a water-based cleaner over freshly sanded clear, just because it's less apt to soak into the clear coat and cause issues down the road as well.
Yeah,
so
staining. I remember I was doing you remember DX330 was my favorite back in the 90s. That was our go-to. Even though we weren't using a lot of PPG products, we loved the DX330 pre-cleaner. And then later on, House Color and Valspar, and I think KC10. I think it's the aerosol. We still actually use that in our shop. Now, does Createx have any plans for actually having a pre-cleaner themselves that you would recommend in the future?
We talked about it, and because of the progression of where we are going with certain paint lines and systems, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibilities. I mean, it would be something that we considered strongly, having a cleaning system like that to go along with our paint system. But at the moment, we really like the PPG products, and that's what we're sticking with right now. But
yeah, I can imagine Kennedy's just off the camera, just going, "Damn, Fraser wants one more thing for us to make for him." It's like, yeah, that's how I roll. Let's go on to the next one. We don't have a picture for it because it's kind of self-explanatory, but I have been saying this for years. Whenever people have a problem with a product, a problem with an effect, a problem with this, I was like, "Did you do a test panel first?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, there you go. You went directly to the car.
Yep.
Does that mean that every single time I do something, I use a test panel? No. But the majority of times, if I'm doing something I've never done before, heck yeah, I'm going to do a test panel. For myself, sometimes the client wants to see it. And so it serves a couple of purposes. It's a great example. When you're done, keep the test panel, clear coat it, hang on the wall, and you can point to that example of an effect or a color to another client and say, hey, yeah, we can do that for you without having to make another test panel. I mean, don't just keep wiping down your test panels. The more test panels you make in your shop, the more things you have on the wall, the least you have to make in the future. At the same time, I've had some test panels for certain graphics. I've actually clear coated, striped, made look really pretty, framed, and sold to the client in the long run. So there's no reason not to do test panels, whether you're testing a paint, an effect, or you name it, or just experimenting. Anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think you hit it right in the head. I definitely. It's cheap insurance. It sounds lame to say that, but it really is. And knowing, especially if it's a product that you're not familiar with, you go into a project where, let's say you're doing an entire bike or a car project or something big, and you don't realize how transparent one of these colors are, and you have primer spots on the car, and you don't realize that, like our sparklescent line, it has a tendency to be more candy-like. It's an effect color. And they don't. Part of the reason that they have that effect is because the transparency gives you that depth. And if you have a color that you're trying to cover, and it's like black and white, or even gray on a background color, you might not be able to make that go away. And now you're already into this project, right? And you have like 4 or 5 coats of color, and you're still seeing that edge of primer or something that you thought was going to go away. And now what do? Now you're going to have to put more material on to make it go away. So I mean, you hit it on the head. The test panel is the exact simple way to know what you're going to expect in a long run, especially when you start your project. And like you said too, you can go ahead and get it looking dialed in and hang it up on the wall in the shop, or give it to the customer as well. It's always cool.
It's another way it's a way to monetize your experiments. It's definitely a do that I think eliminates a lot of problems in the industry, and
great too. One of the things,
but you'd be surprised how many painters don't do it.
Well, and the thing too is do it like you're actually going to do the car, or the project, whatever it is that you're doing. Don't use. I'm just going to use this gun and do it. I've seen that. I've seen tip sizes sometimes will affect metallics the way they look. And don't use a small gun, use a big gun if it's going to be a big gun project, and then don't grab a small touch-up gun and do it. Use what you're going to use on the project. Spray the coat like you normally would. Like I know I just want to see how saturated this color is, and you're pounding on material on this card, and it's not like it's going to be applied on the project that way because you're going to be painting the floor if you put it on that heavy. So spray it like you would spray your project, so you know exactly what you have to achieve, especially if you're doing something even in terms of candies, to know that, okay, this is what 4 coats is going to give me. This is what 5 coats. You could even turn that test panel into a letdown panel to know exactly the look you're going after. And if you have that and it comes out the way you want it, you can bring it into the booth to make sure you have like your control right here. Like, oh, okay, this is the color I want. I don't need to do another coat, or I don't need to go further because now it's going to be darker or it's going to be too light. So it's a very good indicator, and it's going to help you in the long run, as like just a tool in your.
There's no downside. There's
no
downside to do. It's one of those few things where I don't think anyone's going to come up with an excuse for not doing it, except they may say, they're too expensive. So they're buying these sign blinks online. I was like, okay, go find a local trailer shop in town. Almost every town has a company that makes trailers or does signs for the government even.
Yep.
They'll have large remnant stacks and a lot of times it'll be like a 10-foot by 1-foot strips
Yep.
of white powder-coated aluminum. And
Yep.
tell them you'll take those off your hand, pay a small fee to get them cut down to maybe 10
Yep.
by 20 or 10 by 15 or whatever. And then
Right.
make those be and just grab those. I used to get them all the time. I used to go to sign shops and buy their overproduction or their blem signs and use the backs of the signs as sample. So no excuse on that. Number 6 of the do's and don'ts is to, especially for Createx, always use 4011 reducer. Do not use 4012. If you ever do use 4012, it is just to be cocktailed. 4011 is the primary reducer that we use in all the paint systems throughout Createx. And then we have said you could use deionized or distilled water in a pinch, but 4011 is the way to go. So
Yes.
I can't really say any simpler. We even have a picture of that to show you the products. Picture number 6 shows you the bottles, and 4012. The thing is, it's really a fast reducer. It really starts cooking, and it gets scary sometimes, and especially in hot weather, it can cause some problems in adhesion. 4011 works great all the time.
Right.
I actually use 4012 for like cleaning sometimes. If I don't have any 4020. 4020 is another product that Createx makes. It's not a reducer; it is a cleaner. It's got acid. It's actually a water-based paint cleaner that has acetone in it. The 4012 does clean better. So I always like pointing that out. I've said it so many times, and people still, I got this bottle of 4012. Like, if it's really, really cold weather, you can spike your 4011 with a little bit of 4012, and it'll speed it up a bit. But we're talking, if it's that cold, you should have a heater on. You should not be painting outside anyway. So, anything to add to that, or is that pretty much close?
I mean, it gets pretty simple. I mean, that's in the testing that we've done with our products and everything, the progression of it, we found that the best results are with that 4011 reducer, because we do side-by-side testing comparisons, especially with our SSR and our UVLS clears, the top coats. Everything across the board, 4011 gave better results. 4011 gave a cleaner, clear coat, basically, in the long run, and it works extremely better with the candies. I mean, that was one of the first things that we did notice, and that goes back to the tech from a while back. Is 4012 was not good, and you talked about kind of that heat that's generated. It started to cook, and it'll cause the candies to spit or dry up because of that hotness. So yeah, 4011
It
is.
was cooking too much. Now with number 7 of the do's and don'ts, this one is always been a problem. I always have issues with this, and it's something as simple, you think, as tack rags. How can you screw up a tack rag? It's very easy to screw up a tack rag. If you look at picture number 7, you see the tack rag in a nice little package on the left, and on the right, you see one all wadded up. And it's not like, oh, this one's used and no good, and this one's new. The thing is that when you get a tack rag, you do not take it right out of the pouch and wipe the surface down with it. The first thing you do is you unfold it, snap it in both directions, and then loosely wad it and set it aside for 15 minutes, another magical 15 minutes. This allows the adhesives inside, some of the gas to gas out on it. If you're just taking that squared off tack rag and rubbing it on the surface, you're doing more damage than good. It's not even using that adhesive to pull up lint. It's actually smearing it like glue on the surface. So this is something that, where the tack rag is designed to make your paint job better, can actually make it worse. So do you agree with me on that, Chris?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the only other thing in that picture too is just the difference really between the synthetic that was in the package, the Gerson one,
Yeah.
and the traditional tack rag. And we've been doing the videos. We have the Gerson rags, which are designed more for waterborne paint systems, but they work across the board. We just use those again because we're water, so we're using that particular product. But yeah, it's super important to do like what you just said in terms of causing more problems than you do just wiping it right off the bat. You're actually making the glue transfer to your project, so it's not good.
Yeah. And always keep a couple of new ones around. You know, don't unwrap them all and let them sit around. Just keep the new ones around so you can get it whatever you need to it. If you ever get solvent or water directly on these tack rags, chuck them.
Yeah,
Just don't use them. It's not even worth it because
yeah,
they'll kind of consolidate the contaminants and
yeah.
actually will transfer it on your system, your surface a little bit later on.
And it's
Uh,
more cost effective to just toss it and start with a new one. It's not like they're big money, you know. And
No,
it's
no, it's not. Yeah, if you're going broke from that, you have other issues. Number 8, we also have a picture for, and that has to do with the different types of strainers. And a lot of people get freaked out about when switching over to water based about, oh, do I have to buy all new strainers? And I'm used to these I get from my paint store. And many people don't even know the micron are the strainer size of their strainers. So why don't you explain it to them, Chris?
so solvent based naturally has a larger size for the strainers. Going to waterborne products, it's a little bit smaller. The film build of the water based paint system is less than a solvent based paint system. So by nature, you have to have a tighter strainer. With most of the sealers and our pearl colors and our solid colors that are semi-opaques and all that, we're right around a 125 micron, and that's in that picture. And then anything bigger than that, our metallics and our larger pearl flake, like the sparklescent colors, we want about a 190. And that's not far off from the solvent. A lot of the solvent base are right around 200 microns.
Hmm.
So it's right in the same ballpark. You don't have to go with a smaller strainer. You can use a larger strainer, but like 190 rather than the 200 actually will make a big difference. If you want to do specifically, if you want to just get one strainer, then the 190 is good because it kind of works across the board. It'll work well with the candies as well. When the candies are so thin, I usually run all the candies through the 125.
Yeah,
Now,
that with no problem whatsoever. You're not
no
going to have any
the
elements.
only other thing is when you go up to our hot rod sparkles or the large pearl flakes that we have, you need a big strainer. Even like the PPS cups, we didn't have a picture of them there, but I do have a little lid here. This is actually the PPS 2.0 system that we use, and they actually come in 2 different versions. The solvent is the white strainer, and that's 200 micron, and then the blue strainer is their water specific, and I believe it's like 125. I think it's right on the money for water.
Yeah, it's the same with the soda
Yeah,
cups as well,
yeah.
I believe, and some other brands. They actually, if you see 2 strainers and one of them's blue,
Well,
that's for your water. Um,
when you spray the
another
hot, pull that right out.
Yeah, another common uh, thing that a lot of professional painters don't do is they'll have that one thermostat on the wall that's been there for a million years and it's freaking off by 15 degrees, and or they won't have anything at all. They'll just be going off of their phone app or something. You need to
Yeah,
know your
feel.
humidity, your
Yeah,
temperature, and your dew point is the
right,
ultimate. If you can know that all. And
right.
it's fairly simple. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot to buy. You don't need a big, giant, snap-on tools thermometer. You can get a little thermometer that costs $5 at Harbor Freight and slap it on the
Yep.
wall of your booth.
Exactly, and it's cheap insurance. Absolutely, that's the ultimate. You don't want to be painting if you're within 10 points of your humidity and your temperature. So if you're painting and it says 70% humidity and it's 70 degrees, it's gonna take a long time for your paint to dry. So anytime you're within a range of 10 between your temp and your humidity, that's actually a bad scenario. So it's again cheap insurance in terms of
But if you walk in your booth and
yeah.
it's not optimum, don't just like, oh, gotta go home, can't work today. Turn the
Huh.
booth on,
Let it
spend
run.
about 15 minutes and watch your dew point and your humidity drop.
Again, it goes back to the airflow and the air movement. Just a simple bit of air movement is going to help just kind of get rid of that greenhouse effect that you have in terms of that moist environment. So, makes a
Now,
big
this is
difference.
something I'm guilty of because I love mixing in my brush. I don't do the black flushing, but I'll do like the and I just give it a little shake. But if I'm doing, that's not when I'm doing a whole car. When I'm doing, I won't mix in a spray gun. I'll mix in a cup. But we always try and recommend people to mix in the cups, or even if it's not, there's very small cups you can get for measuring, especially nowadays when you're combining your colors with your binder and your reducer. You want to stay pretty accurate to the ratios. You always were supposed to, but some of the old paint systems in the past were very forgiving. And now with custom painting, you're really kind of pushing the envelope. And this isn't just water-based, it's any kind of custom painting. You're really pushing the envelopes and the materials. And the mixing cups not only give you an area to make sure it's stirred in well, without, because shaking can also aerate the paint, which is bad. Especially putting in a bottle and just shaking the bottle a lot. You can aerate, if you got a lot of air in that, you're foaming the paint out. It's a bad cocktail. It's not a martini. So I'm guilty of doing that in my airbrush, but I'm also mixing very small amounts of candies and things for murals in my airbrush. Not that big a deal. I wouldn't take and make a big bottle of clear and just, give the whole cocktail mix going on there. Any other comments you have on that?
Same thing. I mean, you hit it around the head. The only other thing too is really just that consistency too. If you're doing a project over a longer period of time and you want to be exacting in terms of what your ratio.
Picture number 11 actually shows mixing cups. So some people out there would be not sure about the mixing cups. You can get them anywhere. You can get them at Home Depot. You can get them any of your paint supply places. They have little bitty cool ones I use for pinstriping. No, it's picture. Oh yeah, picture number 10. My bad. Sorry. They have little bitty mixing cups like the ones you put pills in. The doctors, you can buy those. Those are salt proof. They get small gradations, not just in ounces, but also in
milliliters. They have them down in milliliters. I mean, you can get them on Amazon. I think you can get like 100 for like $6. Stacked.
And those are the absolute best for pinstriping. And after mixing up small little paints, if I'm just doing a small mural, I do not need to make a quart of paint. I just make a little sucker right there, but. Also, I mix up small amounts of clear. Like I'm doing a golf club or something, and I've just got to mix up enough clear to do a golf club. I'll mix it up in one of those little cups and put it in my airbrush and clear the golf club with that, which is you shouldn't do that. I'm like, it's a gun. It's just a very small, spray gun. Number 11, kind of, I made a comment about back flushing. You really shouldn't back flush your airbrush or your spray gun unless you're in the middle of cleaning it. Right. And if you're in between colors and you're back flushing to clear it, you could be breaking loose a whole lot of crap inside your gun. And another reason not, unless you want to tear your gun down, in which case I use combinations of 90 proof alcohol or 90% alcohol, and I use lacquer thinner to really clean my gun out good when I'm tearing it all the way down. That's airbrush as well as spray guns. If you're in between colors, don't be throwing a lot of caustic chemicals or back flushing, because you can break stuff loose and actually cause more paint contamination. And in some airbrushes, not all, you can actually damage the O-rings on them. And you can, it's not so much damage, but once you get paint to go by that O-ring, it creates a path for more paint to go later on, and that can dry around the O-ring later on. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll accelerate the breakdown of all those parts, and it's just not a good thing.
Plus, it can be dangerous. I mean, dangerous why is Dave was back fleshing this. Dave Monning is going to be pissed I told the story. He was back fleshing I believe it was a VL or it might have been a Thayer Chandler, and he didn't have the air cap on it. And he normally just smacks his hand against it when he back fleshes it, and the needle went into his hand and he hit the air. And it literally Popeyed his arm.
Yep.
The skin around his arm. And hilarity ensued. He didn't lose his arm. He's still with us today. But we can use that to explain a lot of Dave Monning. So anyway, don't backflesh. It can turn your arm into Popeye. I thought you'd think of that one, did you? Another thing we have is, and we got a picture for number 12, is always have a repair kit. And I don't care what you're doing in any industry. If you're using a tool, there should be a repair kit for that tool. And there's a lot of great kits out there. A lot of people make their own kits out of all that, but not just when you're traveling, but have it nearby you, because the downtime is what kills you more than anything else. And Nest Iwata has a great airbrush repair kit with a lot of tools in there that you really need for specifically not just Iwata airbrushes, but for any brand airbrush. So, and then the picture in there this is actually your kit from your over at Createx in Connecticut. It's your kit, and I see that the bottom one's is got some Iwata components, but you got some other stuff going on there that's also just your own personal kit.
The upper one is just a kit that you can get from your jobber, but it's just that that multitude of tools, just having extra brushes, different tip cleaners. I mean, there's so, like you said, you can put together a kit to just have stuff to clean the horns on your air cap when you're using a spray gun or an LPH 80. If you guys are familiar with that, that's got a really small air cap and it has really tiny holes. And the last thing you want to do is be shoving stuff in there that is going to actually affect the size of the opening of the hole and create turbulence. And it's not good because it's not good.
Yeah, there's a number of companies out there. I mean, every jobber out there will have their version of a kit. I know that you can get the Iwata airbrush kit from Coast Airbrush and a number of other suppliers out there. It's just something great to have. I highly recommend. Now,
for sure.
Concerning, I used to have friends me telling you not to shake up your airbrush or shake the paints. There are times you're supposed to shake the paints. A good example would be Createx has little marbles you put inside their bottles. And how much should you shake it? Well, if you're shaking it, you don't feel the little marble. There are a couple of paints out there that Createx has that don't have the marble in them, but most of their paint systems do. And you shake until you can hear the marble and you feel it going kind of freely. Very similar to a rattle can. So if the bottle or the can is designed to be shaken, then you can. The reason it works for Createx is you've got very little amount of air in that bottle by comparison. So that marble is agitating the pigment and making it all up and getting it all back into suspension. So when you put a marble in the bottle, then you can spray it. You don't have a marble in your airbrush, so please don't put a marble in your airbrush to help mix.
And that paint can react a little different too because it's in the bottle. You're not actually adding 40-30, 40-50, or the reducer. You're actually just shaking the paint. So that's good practice.
Fancy paint machines out there. And you've seen that one that it's mostly used for tattoo inks. But there's a company, I forget the name, and it looks like a rotisserie thing. And it fits, and the Createx bottles fit in it, and it just slowly turns all day long. And it's really great. It just keeps the paint constantly from settling. And you can grab, and the funny thing is, I guarantee any artist that uses that will grab the bottle and shake it. I'm like,
shake it anyway.
You just spent $350 on that paint mixer, and you're still you got to get that little shake on the hand. You got to do that.
Yeah.
Number 14 is subjective. Some people think it's overkill. A lot of times will throw paints out automatically when I'm done using them, or I have small bottles I do mixes in. If I'm making small bottles, I don't keep them very long. But if you're mixing your paint up, I always tell people just to I always have Sharpies lying around. Mark that, put the date you made it, and any comments on reproducing that color you need to put on there, or maybe even the name of the job, or even the invoice number, or the job or work order number, so you can keep track of it.
Right.
This will help you in two ways: to help you go back to find a paint that you don't need to remix, to know when it's time to chuck that paint. The longest I keep anything that's mixed, when I see mix, I mean, I can mix two colors of Createx together. It doesn't make a difference. As soon as I add reducer, it's a ticking, I'm not saying time bomb, but it's a ticking machine. Because it is going to start breaking down over time. Same thing with any of your solvent-based paints. You never want to pour back in the can because that solvent is reactionary. It will continue eating and working on the paint slowly but surely. And people say, oh, it has no shelf life. As soon as you put any reducer in, water-based or solvent, it does. So that I don't keep anything longer than 2 weeks that's had any solvent in it. And usually it's only a week, honestly. And in hot weather, I don't keep it at all. Maybe 3 or 4 days. And I don't make large batches anyway. I work very small. So do you agree on that?
Absolutely. And there's so many variables like what you just touched on, too, in terms of weather. And I mean, I see it all the time. People are talking about issues they're having with the paint, and you walk into their shop, and the bottles are open. There's no cap on it, or the flip caps are open. And
oh, gosh, yeah.
Normally, you don't realize it, but all that has an effect on. I mean, this is an air cure. So anytime it's introduced to air, it's going to start affecting the paint itself. And a lot of the products that we just showed, all those mixing cups, they do have lids that you can get for a majority of those mixing cups. So that even when you're not pouring it back into the bottle, at least you can keep a lid on. Anything you can do to slow down that process.
Preventing oxidation is what you're doing. Oxygen is your enemy in this situation. Even one-shot. I mean, one-shot pinstriping paint. Yeah. I remember an old pinstriper telling me, he goes, "You want to know a trick to keep that skin from forming on your paint?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." He goes, "Yeah, take a drag of your cigarette, make sure it's an unfiltered Camel." And he's like, and he shuts the lid. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's the carbon dioxide you're putting in there that's displacing oxygen and not the cigarette. I think you need to smoke. Anyway, it was a good idea. CO2 does help. It does displace it. And guess what? It won't skin over. And you don't need to deal with the fact that you now got a bunch of unfiltered camel smoke and cigarette chunks in your paint. But it is a concept. You're preventing oxidation. Now, another trick is if you're storing your paint, do not store 3 ounces of paint in a freaking gallon can, because what you're really storing is a lot of oxygen with a little bit of paint, and that paint's going to be just dry as a bone.
Right.
Always mix down. If you got a half quart, start putting that in smaller containers. You want to displace the oxygen as little as possible. And you don't need to just, with your Camel cigarette, whenever you're closing the lids on your paint. You want to displace as much oxygen as possible. Oxygen is your friend to keep you alive. It's your paint's enemy. So,
and the thing too on that too, I mean, we'll go back to the PPS cups there. These are the lids. They come with plugs, right? And the biggest thing, if you're going to use these, and again, like I talked about, you go into shops and you see them just sitting on the bench like this. If you put that plug in and keep it upside down, it's going to keep paint wet in that filter.
Yeah, it doesn't give an area for it to dry.
If
the filter dries, you're screwed. It's not a filter anymore. It's a lid.
Yep. It's a lid. And now you have a paperweight. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a lot of paperweights. They're called old airbrushes I didn't clean in time. Now, another number 15 is one that, going back to the solvent-based days, I would tell people, and it's give your paint an hour before you mask on it. So this isn't a water-based, waterborne, or solvent issue. This is a paint issue. If you love your paint job, you're really concerned about it. Tape is designed to stick, and paint is designed to stick. The difference is the tape is ready to stick right away. Paint is still adhering, right after you spray it. Even after it's dry, it's like, oh, it's dry to the touch. I can mask on it now. You may be able to mask on it. It may not be a good idea. Give it a freaking hour. I guarantee there's something else you can do for an hour before masking on it. If you absolutely, let's say, if you absolutely positively have to mask on something, at least dull it. Get that tape and dull it on your shirt. You see that in videos. Be really, really careful, and don't cry and be a little baby when you lift the paint anyway. So, I can't really say it enough when people show me tape tracking and lift all this kind. I'm like, yeah, you didn't wait. Well, I didn't have time. I go, but you have time to fix it now, right? Right. You have time to go back and respray it. I assume, or you'd like to. Right. So, I mean, being sarcastic, but it's the truth.
It's 100% true. Yeah.
A few minutes saved, now save you hours later on. Yeah. And I can tell you, I've seen custom painters that were amazing painters, the most creative people I've ever met, using the best materials on the best vehicles. But because they weren't good time managers and they didn't take precautions, put themselves out of business, all by themselves, just by losing days and weeks because of redos. Now, this is another thing that this is a caveat to all the people in the 90s from the t-shirt industry, that the Mr. Helpers that wanted to show us the best reducers to use in water-based paints. And I remember there's people out there saying, hey, you can use Windex, oh, you can use Fantastic, you can use this, you can, there's always going to be a MacGyver out there that's going to come up with, this works best. Now, can you make your own reducer? Sure you can. Should you make your own reducer? I don't know. Time-wise, cost-wise, it may not be beneficial. But stay away from cleaners. You say, well, but Fantastic and Windex work great to reduce down, Createx and some other water-based paints. Yes, it does. But it didn't. It's not because it's Createx or Fantastic or any of these other. The ammonia is not the good thing. What it is the small amount of polyglycol alcohol and deionized water that's in there that's actually helping it. Not all these other cleaners. Our colorants, our perfumes are definitely not the ammonia. As a matter of fact, if you don't even use Windex to clean your airbrush. You shouldn't use Windex to even clean anything on your car that has chrome. Windex is ammonia, and even ammonia D, which will strip the chromium off of chrome. If it can take chrome and destroy it, what's it going to do to your paint? Let's say you have chromium yellow. Not anymore. It's going to be discolored and stained from using Windex. So that's my spiel. Use the right reducer for the right job, and you will never see a paint company out there that sends you a package of paints and a bottle of Fantastic. So, any other thing you want to add to that?
That's pretty much it. Yeah, that's
one of my nitpicks. I get kind of like, it's like chalk nails. I actually don't mind chalk. I was the kid that did chalk nails on the chalkboard. When I see somebody using that Windex, I'm like, no.
And you see it all the time. People, using that for like a a cleaner, even a pre-clean, and it's just
You
there's
can
so
buy empty squeak bottle. If it's the squirt bottle that you love, then put your reducer in a squirt bottle and call it a day. You know,
there's
just please
so many
don't
extra
use.
things in there that don't need to be, that are going to affect adhesion, and that's really what it boils down to. There's so many additives in there that it's just not good, not good.
Now, another thing, I've got a whole bunch of, matter of fact, for really good cleaning, I don't use it for reducing, but for really good cleaning, if you're one of those Windex guys, try getting some 90 proof or 90% alcohol. You can buy it at your local pharmacy, and you have those squirt bottles. Yeah, matter of fact, like CVS or Rite Aid has like 2 squirt bottles for $5. It's a killer.
Yep.
And it's 90 proof. It's 90%, not 70. And that is great cleaner. Do not use that in your paint. It just, it hyper dries it, but it's a great cleaner.
It will, yeah, it is.
Another thing that I guess I put all my real bad nitpicks at the end. Leaving tape on, and I'm guilty of this just because I'm clumsy, but don't leave your tape laying on the ground or any dirty surface. Now, I'm not anal retentive. I don't take my tape when I'm done, I put it in a Ziploc bag and hang it back. No, I'm not like that. I probably should be, but I'm not. Reason being is that tape, when it lays on the ground, can pick up dirt. And then that dirt and hairs, cat hair in my situation, and any lint is now going to be transferred to your paint job. A lot of times when you see a paint job that all of a sudden has a hair in it, that hair was stuck to the tape already, not from you laying it out, but it was already on the tape when you were laying it, you couldn't feel it. And if you look at tape, especially if it's summertime and it's hot, one side will get really, really sticky. And it's usually the side exposed to the heat. And then if you lay that down, it's all of a sudden just dirt. And don't make this mistake. Oh, just clean off some lacquer thinner. Throw that tape away. It's now not tape. It's evil. I don't know what it is, but it's not tape. It's like automatic delamination tool. You know, if you don't like someone at a shop, you can use that trick to get back at them. But I shouldn't even say that. If you're gonna, there's plenty of those neat tricks. But avoid getting your tape dirty. It's just and tape is not cheap. It can cost that can actually set you back quite a bit of money. And you think, you're not using that much of it. Ooh, the last look Toyota, easily 2 miles. 2 miles of tape on that truck. So it can happen. Any other things you'd like to add to that?
No, that's pretty much the same. The other thing too is just be mindful if you're laying something out and the car happens to be in sunlight. And I've seen guys do this too, where they have sanded clear and they just walk away from it, and there's a roll of tape somewhere on the hood, a fender, a roof, even, and you walk away from it, and now, like what you just talked about in terms of being in the sun, you're getting a little bit of adhesive transfer because that glue is going to get soft, and it's going to go into that clear coat, and you might not see it. You pull it off, you get everything done, and then all of a sudden the car's cleared. Now you start seeing all these funny blemishes all over the place.
And that being said, don't leave a masked car in the sun just for shits and giggles. Move it back in your shot. It's like, hey, I want to take out in the sun and look at it. It's not painted. It's got tape on it. I understand you're moving vehicles around. Do not leave it outside. And if you're leaving your car that's masked in the rain, I can't help you. There's a lot of other things that you're doing wrong. You're also probably not showing up to work clothed. You probably have other issues. So we won't even go there. Now, here's another one that I can speak for Createx, so can Chris. Know your cure window. And this doesn't matter what paint, know your cure window on your paints. Because this helps you on not just reapplication, but also helps you know when things are fully cured, fully dry. Curing basically means the paint's done. It's not drying anymore, because when things are dry, they're not necessarily cured. They'll dry on the surface, but they're not fully cured. When something's cured, that means, except for oxidation and damage to the raw material, it's not going to get any better. It's just going to get worse. So you're done, and that's it. So any suggestions on that? I think Createx's cure window for all the products, I believe, is at 48 hours?
48 hours.
Yeah.
90% of the resins, all of our resins are within about 48 hours. So that means 48 hours.
48 hours. Now, I know with solvent-based paints, it's usually about 6 days, fully cured, and that's like a stacked paint job. Here's something interesting. It may be 6 days for any solvent-based paint job out there, fully cured. But you always hear someone saying, "Oh yeah, but I'm not supposed to buff it and wax it for like a month because it was cured in a baking booth." When you bake a paint job, it's dry and it's ready to leave and be assembled, but it's not cured for 30 to 60 days, depends on the baking cycle and the type of paint used. So makes you kind of think. Remember, heat. Get your friend, it's also
No.
not your friend. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I've seen heat cause more problems, more damage across not just water, but solvent. I mean, solvent pop. You know, you walk out of the booth and something looks awesome, and then you throw a bake on it and you come back and you're like, what happened? It looks like matte clear. You know, it's just bad.
yay, heat. Now, here's a number 19 is this is not just indicative of Createx, but I love it. I mentioned it with Createx because we have the new UVLS clears out there, which is the 4050, 4051, and 4052. 4050 being the gloss, 4052 being the matte. And if people say, well, which one do you use as a balancing clear inside your paint, or which one do you use for an adhesion promoter? Because they're great adhesion promoters too. I always would go with the gloss. And if I had a choice of all of the sealers, the autoborne sealers Createx has, which one would I use as an adhesion promoter? I would use the 6000, which is clear. Why? Anything that has pigment is not going to have as much adhesion because part of the resin is being displaced by a non-adhesive inert pigment. The same thing with the matte and the satins. A lot of times matte clears will have, and this is not just Createx, this can also be other brands too, will have silicate in it to create the matte effect. Makes them very tough and durable, but doesn't make them adhere as well because, again, this floating silicate, or like glass, a ground glass, is floating and displacing resin, and resin is what sticks. Pigment doesn't stick, solvent doesn't stick, metallics don't stick. What sticks is the base resins. So if you want to know what's going to stick the best, what is the shiniest and the clearest?
Right. Yep, that's it.
And don't come back and say, but water's shiny and clear. No, you need to stop right now. You're in that category, the guy that doesn't come to the work with his pants on. So I can't help you on that. Anything you want to add? Anything you want to add on to that with my?
No, I mean that doesn't get any simpler. You're 100% right. You know, the less ingredient you have in a material, the better the chance of adhesion, maximum adhesion. So that's
now. Last but not least, we have, and I think we had a picture for CreatexTech.com. You can also go to CreatexColors.com. You can kind of meander through the links. You can go to our YouTube channel for Createx Colors. You can also go to YouTube channel for This May End Badly. You can go check on these. When you're going on, if you have any questions that we didn't answer here, any do's and don'ts, we may have answered them on that. Matter of fact, if you really want to, like I say, if you really want to watch this video, you have to. If you're watching this video, you've already gone there. But things like this video are on there. If you've got other questions, you can go on there and you can ask. So when people say, oh, I talked to this guy and I talked to that guy, did you go to Createx Tech? And they're like, no. I go, that should be the first place you go to. And if you can't find it, then you start screaming. But until you've gone there, don't scream. After that, if it's not on there, scream all you like. In fact, this video you're looking at right now is because of people saying, it took me, I couldn't find that on the video. And we're like, here you go. So anything else you'd like to add to that, Chris?
No, I think that's good. I think that's pretty simple, I think, in terms of what we're talking about. And the end-all, be-all would be our tech page. And we could find most of the information that's out there. Again, like you said, you get it from different people. We want you to go to us. You know, that's our...
And the cool thing is, it's not like, we're not like Amazon where there's like a billion gazillion people out there and you're going to get like, you know, Bubba answering the tech lines who normally sweeps out in front with a crash helmet on his head. No, you're calling Createx, you're going to get Chris, who, in all honesty, sometimes wears his helmet when he's out sweeping in the front. But that's because, you know, the law in Connecticut makes him wear it whenever he's outside. But, and when you're calling my shop, you know, I wear a helmet all the time. We're the ones answering the questions. So if you want to blame the tech, pretty much, us guys here, it's like, I don't like the tech on your website. Well, if it's not me and it's not Chris, it's Craig Kennedy. So you can turn around and just say it's one of the Craigs or it's the other C guy. It's lowercase c Chris. So it's the guy, if you're going to blame anyone at Createx, it's the guy with the hair or the guy without the hair. You can also specify it that way. So I think we've about covered it. I think this is a great little video for the do's and don'ts, part one. And then eventually we'll have part deux. It'll be spelled more like part duh. You know, like duh. You know, so I can't really think of anything else except from Craig Frazier here at the beautiful Hectic Film Studios in downtown Bakersfield and Chris Arpin at the Createx Colors in Connecticut. I think we will see you guys next time. What do you say, Chris?
I think so. Take care, guys.
Later.